The emergency alarm echoed through the halls of the Zilani Council chamber. High Counselor Vex rushed to his communication station, his blue skin turning pale as he read the incoming message. The transmission came from deep space, from the Keth Nebula where their research team had been studying ancient ruins. "This is Commander Theiss of the research vessel Harmony's Edge." The weak signal crackled through the speakers. "We are under attack by Vorthak forces. 15 enemy ships have us surrounded. Our engines are destroyed. We need immediate help." The council chamber fell silent. Every Zilani knew about the Vorthak Empire. They were warriors who enslaved entire worlds and sold captured people to the highest bidder. No one had ever escaped a Vorthak attack fleet. "How long until our defense ships can reach them?" Counselor Vex asked his military advisor. 3 weeks at best speed," General Korath replied, his voice heavy with defeat. "The research team has maybe 3 days before the Vorthak break through their shields." Vex looked at the star map on his screen. 23 Zilani scientists and crew members were going to die, and there was nothing they could do about it. Their own military was too far away. Their allies in the Galactic Federation were even further. Then he remembered something. The newest members of the Federation lived much closer to the Keth Nebula. The humans from Earth had built a small space station just 2 days away from that region. "What about the humans?" Vex asked quietly. The other council members looked at him with surprise. The humans were a peaceful species from a beautiful blue world. They grew food and made art. What could they do against Vorthak warships? "Counselor, the humans have no real military," General Korath said. "They joined the Federation only 6 months ago. Their ships are small and weak compared to Vorthak vessels." Vex stared at the message from Commander Theiss. The transmission was getting weaker. Soon it would cut out completely and they would never hear from their people again. "Send the distress call to the humans," he ordered. "It's better than doing nothing." Far across space, Admiral Jake Morrison sat in his command chair aboard the UES Vengeance. The human ship was not large compared to other Federation vessels, but it was built differently. Where other ships had smooth curves and bright colors, human ships looked like metal weapons floating in space. Morrison was reading reports from Earth when his communication officer called out. "Admiral, we're getting an emergency transmission from the Zilani Council." "Put it through," Morrison said. The desperate voice of High Counselor Vex filled the bridge. "Human fleet, this is an emergency request for help. Our research team is trapped by Vorthak forces in the Keth Nebula. 23 of our people will die unless someone can break through their blockade within 72 hours. Our own forces cannot reach them in time. Please help us if you can." Morrison stood up from his chair. Around him, his crew had stopped their work to listen. The bridge was completely quiet except for the hum of the ship's engines. "How many enemy ships?" Morrison asked his tactical officer. Lieutenant Commander Ryan Clark checked his screens. 15 Vorthak heavy cruisers, sir. They've already destroyed 2 Zilani patrol ships that tried to help." Morrison walked to the main screen that showed the star map. The Keth Nebula was marked in red, showing it as a dangerous area. The nebula would interfere with their sensors and communications, making any rescue attempt much harder. "Captain Rodriguez to the bridge," Morrison said into his communicator. Within minutes, Captain Lisa Rodriguez arrived from her ship, the UES Retribution. She was Morrison's best tactical officer, and her ship was docked to the Vengeance for a meeting they had been having about patrol schedules. "You heard the message?" Morrison asked her. "Yes, sir." 15 Vorthak ships against our 6, Rodriguez said. "The math doesn't look good." Morrison smiled grimly. "The math never looks good for humans, Lisa. That's why we usually win." He turned to address his bridge crew. "The Vorthak think they know how this works. They surround a weak ship, demand surrender, and take prisoners to sell as slaves. They've done it 1,000 times to peaceful Federation species." Morrison paused and looked each of his officers in the eye. "But they've never tried it on humans before. They don't know that we don't leave people behind. Ever." Lieutenant Commander Clark stepped forward. "Sir, the Zilani don't expect us to succeed. They're just hoping we might buy their people a few more hours. Then let's give them more than they expect." Morrison said, "Signal all ships. We're going hunting." Within an hour, 6 human ships had undocked from the space station and were accelerating toward the Keth Nebula. The fleet was small compared to most military forces, but each ship carried weapons and armor designed by a species that had spent millions of years learning how to survive on a world that constantly tried to kill them. The UES Vengeance led the formation, followed by the UES Retribution and the UES Savage Thunder. Behind them came three smaller destroyers, the UES Wolverine, the UES Falcon, and the UES Viper. Each ship was painted in dark colors that would help them hide in the black of space. As they traveled toward the nebula, Morrison gathered his senior officers in the war room. Captain Rodriguez sat across from him, studying tactical displays. Commander Clark reviewed intelligence reports about Vorthak fighting methods. The Vorthak have never lost a fleet engagement, Rodriguez said. They're bigger than us, they have more ships, and they're experienced fighters. But they've never fought humans, Morrison replied. Every species they've beaten was peaceful. They learned to fight by bullying people who wouldn't fight back. Clark pulled up a three-dimensional image of the nebula. The good news is that the nebula will hide our approach. The bad news is that it will also hide them from us until we're very close. Morrison studied the display. The Keth Nebula was full of gas and dust that would interfere with sensors on both sides. It would be like fighting in fog, where you couldn't see your enemy until you were almost close enough to touch them. That works for us, Morrison said. Humans are ambush predators. We've been hunting in the dark for 1,000,000 years. He stood up and walked to the window that showed the stars rushing past as they traveled at faster-than-light speed. Somewhere ahead, 23 innocent people were waiting to die or be enslaved. The Vorthak thought they were safe because no Federation species had ever been able to challenge them. But the Vorthak had never met humans before. They didn't know that humans came from a world where only the smartest, toughest, and most determined creatures survived. They didn't know that humans had learned to hunt in packs, to plan complex attacks, and to never give up no matter how bad things looked. Time to destination? Morrison asked. 18 hours at current speed, Clark replied. Morrison nodded. In 18 hours, the Vorthak were going to learn something new about the galaxy. They were going to learn what happened when they threatened people that humans had promised to protect. They were going to learn why Earth was called a death world. The human fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Keth Nebula. Immediately, their sensors became fuzzy and unclear as the thick gas and dust interfered with their equipment. Admiral Morrison stood on the bridge of the UES Vengeance, watching the swirling colors of the nebula on his main screen. Any sign of the Vorthak fleet? He asked. Not yet, sir, replied Lieutenant Sarah Kim from the sensor station. The nebula is blocking most of our long-range scans. We'll have to get closer to find them. Morrison nodded. He had expected this. The nebula would hide both fleets until they were very close to each other. This was both good and bad for his plan. Suddenly, their communication system crackled to life. A harsh, aggressive voice spoke in the common galactic language. Unknown ships, this is War Chieftain Grax of the Vorthak Empire. You are entering a restricted military zone. Turn around and leave immediately or we will destroy you. Morrison signaled his communication officer to open a channel. This is Admiral Morrison of the Human Defense Fleet. We are here on a Federation rescue mission. Release your prisoners and withdraw from this system. Harsh laughter came through the speakers. Humans, another weak Federation species. We have studied your files. You come from a world of farmers and artists. Leave now before you get hurt. Morrison smiled coldly. The Vorthak had looked at Earth's peaceful cities and green forests, but they had missed the important details. They didn't know about Earth's massive storms, deadly earthquakes, and the millions of species that had learned to kill or be killed. Captain Rodriguez, are you receiving this? Morrison asked on a private channel. Yes, sir, came Rodriguez's voice from the UES Retribution. The Vorthak sound very confident. Good. Confident enemies make mistakes. Begin flanking Maneuver Alpha. Morrison watched his tactical display as the human fleet split into 3 groups. He would take the UES Vengeance and 2 destroyers straight toward where the Vorthak fleet was hiding. This would look like a standard Federation attack that the Vorthak had seen many times before. Captain Rodriguez would take the UES Retribution and 1 destroyer on a wide path around the left side of the nebula. Commander Clark and the UES Savage Thunder would disappear completely into the thickest part of the nebula. Where sensors couldn't track anything, sir? We're picking up movement ahead, Lieutenant Kim reported. 12 large ships moving to intercept us. They're following standard Vorthak battle formation. Morrison studied the enemy positions on his screen. The Vorthak were doing exactly what human intelligence reports said they would do. They were sending most of their fleet to face what looked like the main human attack, while keeping 3 ships back to guard their prisoners. The Vorthak had won hundreds of battles using the same tactics. They would charge straight at their enemies with overwhelming force, counting on their bigger ships and heavier weapons to win quickly. It worked against peaceful species who fought fair, honorable battles. But humans didn't fight fair. Humans fought to win. All ships maintain formation and approach slowly, Morrison ordered. Make it look like we're following Federation naval doctrine. The 12 Vorthak ships came out of the nebula like angry giants. Each one was twice the size of a human ship, with thick armor and massive energy weapons. They moved in a perfect formation that showed hundreds of years of military tradition. War Chieftain Grax's voice boomed across space again. Last warning, humans. Surrender now and we will make your deaths quick. Negative, Morrison replied calmly. We don't surrender. We don't retreat. And we don't leave people behind. The Vorthak ships opened fire first, sending bright beams of energy toward the human fleet. Morrison's ships scattered like birds, their smaller size allowing them to move much faster than the heavy Vorthak vessels. Return fire, but keep it light, Morrison ordered. Make them think we're just another weak Federation species. The human ships fired back with about half their real firepower. Their shots hit the Vorthak shields but didn't do much damage. The Vorthak war chieftain laughed over the communication channel. Is that the best you can do? Our shields can handle 10 times that much power. But while Grax was laughing, Captain Rodriguez was moving her ships into position. The UES Retribution and its escort had used the nebula to hide their approach, and now they were behind the Vorthak formation. Rodriguez had studied every Vorthak battle on record. She knew that their shields were designed to stop the energy weapons that most galactic species used. But humans had learned to fight on a world where rocks fell from the sky, and earthquakes split the ground. Human weapons threw solid metal at incredible speeds. Target their engines and life support. Rodriguez ordered her weapons officer. Fire when ready. 2 Vorthak cruisers suddenly exploded from behind as human kinetic weapons tore through their shields like they weren't even there. The solid metal projectiles punched through armor that had protected the Vorthak for centuries. What was that? Grax screamed over the communication channel. How did they get behind us? The answer came from Commander Clark and the UES Savage Thunder. His ship had been hiding in the deepest part of the nebula, where the gas was so thick that sensors couldn't see anything. Now he struck like a predator jumping out of tall grass. But Clark didn't target the enemy ship's weapons or engines like most military forces would. Instead, he aimed for their artificial gravity generators and life support systems. These were systems that peaceful species never attacked, because destroying them would kill everyone on board. Humans had learned different lessons on their death world. Sometimes, to save innocent lives, you had to be willing to take others. One Vorthak ship lost its artificial gravity, and the crew inside was thrown around like toys in a box. Another ship's life support failed, and the Vorthak warriors inside had to choose between fighting and breathing. This is impossible, Grax roared. No Federation species fights like this. Morrison's voice was calm and cold when he replied. We're not most Federation species. We're humans. We come from Earth. The name meant nothing to Grax, but it would soon. The remaining Vorthak ships tried to regroup, but they were fighting an enemy that didn't follow any of the rules they knew. Human ships moved like hunting animals, working together to surround and destroy their prey. Lieutenant Kim looked up from her sensor station. Admiral, the Vorthak are pulling back toward their prisoners. I think they're going to use the Zilani as shields. Morrison's expression became even colder. Using innocent people as shields was exactly the kind of thing that Vorthak did, and exactly the kind of thing that made humans angry. Signal all ships, Morrison said. The Vorthak just made this personal. Time to show them what Deathworld fury looks like. The human fleet changed its approach completely. Instead of the careful, measured attacks that Federation forces usually made, they began to hunt like the predators their evolution had made them to be. The Vorthak had wanted to fight farmers and artists. Instead, they had found the children of Earth, a world that had spent 4 billion years teaching its creatures how to kill or be killed. The real battle was about to begin. War Chieftain Grax stared at his tactical display in disbelief. Half of his fleet was gone, destroyed by an enemy that fought like nothing he had ever seen before. The human ships moved through space like hunting animals, striking from unexpected directions and using weapons that tore through Vorthak armor like it was made of paper. Pull back to the prisoner ship, Grax ordered his remaining vessels. Use the Zilani as shields. The humans will have to stop their attack to avoid killing innocent people. It was a tactic that had worked against every other Federation species, When faced with the choice between winning a battle and saving innocent lives, peaceful civilizations always chose to save lives. Grax was confident that humans would do the same. He was about to learn how wrong he was. Admiral Morrison watched the Vorthak ships retreat toward the disabled Zilani research vessel. His tactical officer, Lieutenant Commander Clark, looked up from his station with a grim expression. "Sir, they're positioning themselves around the Harmony's edge. If we continue our attack, we might hit the Zilani ship by accident." Morrison's face was hard as stone. "Signal Captain Hayes. Tell him to prepare his Marines for a boarding action." Clark looked surprised. "Sir, a boarding action in the middle of a space battle? That's incredibly dangerous. So is letting the Vorthak keep those prisoners," Morrison replied. "The Vorthak think they understand humans because they've read our peaceful diplomatic files. Time to give them a proper education." Captain Ben Hayes received Morrison's orders aboard the assault ship UES Wolverine. Hayes was a former Special Forces soldier who had volunteered for the dangerous job of leading boarding parties against enemy ships. His Marines were all volunteers too, men and women who understood that sometimes the only way to save innocent people was to put yourself in terrible danger. "Listen up," Hayes told his team as they put on their armor. "We're going to board a Vorthak ship in the middle of a battle to rescue hostages. This is exactly the kind of impossible mission that humans are known for." Sergeant Kate Sullivan checked her weapon, a rifle that fired solid metal bullets instead of energy beams. Most galactic species thought kinetic weapons were primitive, but humans had learned that sometimes the old ways worked best. "How do we get close enough to board?" asked Corporal Danny Martinez. "The Vorthak will see us coming and shoot us down." Hayes smiled grimly. "We're not going to dock like civilized people. We're going to approach through the debris field and attach ourselves to their hull like parasites." The Marines looked at each other. It was a crazy plan that could easily get them all killed. But it was also the kind of plan that only humans would be insane enough to try. Meanwhile, the space battle continued to rage around the prisoner ship. Captain Rodriguez in the UES Retribution was hunting the remaining Vorthak vessels like a wolf hunting deer. Her ship would appear out of the nebula, strike hard with kinetic weapons, and then disappear before the enemy could return fire. "Target their communication arrays," Rodriguez ordered. "I want them blind and deaf." The Retribution's weapons reached out and destroyed the sensor dishes on 2 Vorthak ships. Now they couldn't talk to each other or coordinate their movements. They were alone in the dark, facing an enemy they couldn't understand. Grax was beginning to panic. Nothing in his military training had prepared him for this kind of fighting. The humans didn't follow any of the rules of civilized warfare. They struck from the shadows, targeted systems that other species considered off-limits, and seemed to have no fear of death. "Signal the prisoner ship," Grax ordered. "Tell the humans that if they don't surrender immediately, we will execute all the Zilani hostages." The message was broadcast on all frequencies, reaching every human ship in the battle. For a moment, there was silence. Then Admiral Morrison's voice cut through space like a knife. "Negative. Mission parameters are rescue and neutralization of hostile forces. You have 30 seconds to surrender before we take your ship by force." Grax couldn't believe what he was hearing. "You would risk the lives of innocent people just to win a battle?" Morrison's reply sent chills through every Vorthak warrior listening. "We're not risking their lives. We're going to save them. The only question is whether you'll still be breathing when we're done." At that moment, Captain Hayes and his Marines reached the hull of the Vorthak command ship. They had traveled through the debris field using personal maneuvering units, moving between pieces of destroyed ships like ghosts in the night. The Vorthak sensors had never detected them. Sergeant Sullivan planted explosive charges on the ship's outer hull, while her squad took positions around the breach point. The charges were designed to create a hole just big enough for humans to get through, but small enough that the ship wouldn't lose atmosphere catastrophically. "Charges set," Sullivan reported. "Ready to breach on your command." Hayes looked at his team. They were about to board an enemy warship filled with warriors who were bigger and stronger than humans. They would be outnumbered and fighting in an environment they didn't know. By all logical measures, they should fail, but humans had never been logical. They were survivors who had learned to hunt in packs, to use tools and tactics that their enemies didn't expect, and to never give up no matter how bad the odds looked. "Breach and clear," Hayes ordered. The explosion tore a hole in the Vorthak ship's hull. and human Marines poured through like water through a crack in a dam. They moved through the ship's corridors with the coordination of a wolf pack, their weapons firing solid bullets that punched through Vorthak armor like it was made of cloth. The Vorthak warriors were strong and fierce, but they had learned to fight other strong, fierce opponents in honest combat. They had never faced persistence hunters who used every dirty trick that millions of years of evolution had taught them. Corporal Martinez threw a smoke grenade that filled a corridor with thick fog, then used thermal imaging to shoot enemies who couldn't see him. Private Lisa Chen crawled through ventilation shafts to attack from above, dropping down behind Vorthak positions like a spider. The human Marines moved through the ship like they owned it, their training and instincts perfectly suited for this kind of close-quarters battle. They had learned to fight in the cities and jungles of Earth, where cover was everywhere and every corner could hide an enemy. Sergeant Sullivan reached the ship's bridge first, kicking down the door and rolling into the room with her weapon ready. War Chieftain Grax stood in the center of the bridge, a massive warrior in ornate armor who looked like he could crush a human with his bare hands. "You dare board my ship?" Grax roared, drawing a sword that glowed with energy. Sullivan looked up at the alien warrior who was twice her size and smiled coldly. "Yeah, I dare. Want to do something about it." The war chieftain had no idea that he was about to learn the most important lesson about humans. Size and strength meant nothing if you didn't know how to use them against an enemy who fought like a cornered animal and had absolutely no intention of fighting fair. The real fight was just beginning. War Chieftain Grax charged at Sergeant Sullivan with his glowing sword raised high. The massive Vorthak warrior was confident in his strength and size. He had killed dozens of enemies in single combat, and this small human looked like easy prey. Sullivan didn't try to match his strength. Instead, she did what humans had learned to do when facing bigger predators on Earth. She moved sideways, letting Grax's sword cut through empty air, then shot him twice in the knee with her kinetic rifle. The war chieftain stumbled and fell, his own momentum working against him. He had expected the human to stand and fight like an honorable warrior. He hadn't expected her to fight like a persistence hunter who cared more about winning than looking brave. "You fight without honor," Grax screamed as he tried to get back to his feet. Sullivan kept her weapon trained on him while Captain Hayes and the rest of the Marines secured the bridge. Honor doesn't save innocent people. Results do. Through the ship's communication system, they could hear the sounds of battle throughout the vessel. Human Marines were fighting Vorthak warriors in every corridor, and the humans were winning, not because they were stronger or tougher, but because they fought like the apex predators their evolution had made them. Captain Hayes found the ship's prisoner holding area on the tactical display. 23 Zilani scientists and crew members were locked in cells near the ship's engine room. Some of them had been hurt during interrogation, but they were all still alive. "Sullivan, Martinez with me," Hayes ordered. "Chen, secure the bridge and make sure our new friend here doesn't cause any trouble." Private Chen nodded and pointed her rifle at the wounded war chieftain. Grax glared at her with hatred, but he didn't move. The human's weapon had already proven it could hurt him badly, and he was beginning to understand that these creatures didn't hesitate to use lethal force. Hayes led his team through the ship toward the prisoner area. They moved carefully, watching for ambushes and booby traps. The Vorthak were known for rigging their ships to explode rather than let them be captured. Meanwhile, the space battle outside was reaching its climax. Admiral Morrison had coordinated his ships to surround the remaining Vorthak vessels. The enemy was trapped between the human fleet and the nebula with nowhere to run. "Admiral, the Vorthak are trying to send a distress signal to their empire," reported Lieutenant Kim. Morrison's expression was ice cold. "Jam their communications. No word of this gets out until we're ready." Captain Rodriguez in the UES Retribution had cornered 2 Vorthak cruisers near the edge of the nebula. The enemy ships were trying to escape, but Rodriguez was not going to let them go. The Vorthak had made this personal when they threatened innocent people. "Target their engines," Rodriguez ordered. "I want them dead in space." The Retribution's kinetic weapons reached out and shattered the engine sections of both enemy ships. The Vorthak vessels went dark, floating helplessly in space. Rodriguez opened a communication channel to the disabled ships. "This is Captain Rodriguez of the Human Defense Fleet. Surrender now and you will be treated according to Federation law. Continue to resist and you will be destroyed." The response came quickly. "We surrender. Please don't kill us." It was the first time in recorded history that Vorthak warriors had surrendered to an enemy. The news would shock the entire galaxy when it got out. Back aboard the captured command ship, Captain Hayes and his team had reached the prisoner cells. The Zilani inside looked terrible. They had been beaten and starved, and some showed signs of torture. The sight made Hayes angry in a way that was dangerous for his enemies. "Get them out of there," Hayes ordered Sergeant Sullivan. Sullivan used a small explosive charge to blow the lock off the first cell. Inside, Commander Thiss of the research vessel looked up with surprise and hope. "You're human," Thiss said weakly. "You actually came for us." "We told you we don't leave people behind," Hayes replied as he helped the injured Zilani to his feet. "Can you walk?" "I think so," Thiss said. "But there are Vorthak guards coming. You need to get out of here while you can." Hayes smiled grimly. "Let them come. We're not done with this ship yet." The Vorthak guards arrived just as the humans were freeing the last of the prisoners. There were 6 of them, all heavily armed and looking for revenge after watching their ship get taken over by creatures they had thought were weak. The guards charged down the corridor, firing energy weapons and screaming war cries. They expected the humans to take cover and fight defensively like most Federation species would. Instead, Corporal Martinez threw himself around a corner and rolled directly toward the enemy, firing his kinetic rifle as he moved. Sergeant Sullivan used a flashbang grenade to blind the guards, then attacked them while they couldn't see. The fight was over in seconds. The Vorthak guards lay unconscious on the deck, victims of weapons and tactics they had never encountered before. The rescued Zilani stared at the human Marines with amazement and fear. "How did you do that?" Commander Thiss asked. "They were bigger and better armed than you." Hayes helped an injured Zilani scientist to her feet. "Size and weapons don't matter if you don't know how to use them against someone who refuses to quit." The human Marines escorted the rescued prisoners back toward their ships. Along the way, they passed Vorthak warriors who had been defeated and captured. The sight of their mighty Empire's soldiers surrendering to humans was something none of the Zilani had ever expected to see. Admiral Morrison received the report from Captain Hayes with satisfaction. All 23 hostages were safe, and the Vorthak command ship was under human control. The space battle was over, and humanity had won its first major military victory since joining the Galactic Federation. But Morrison knew this was about more than one battle. The Vorthak Empire had been terrorizing peaceful species for centuries, taking slaves and destroying lives. Today they had learned that their reign of terror was over. "Signal all remaining Vorthak ships," and Morrison ordered. "Tell them they have one chance to surrender. If they refuse, we will hunt down every single one of them." The response came within minutes. Every surviving Vorthak vessel surrendered without firing another shot. Their warriors, who had never known defeat before, were too shaken to continue fighting. War Chieftain Grax, bleeding and defeated on his own bridge, looked up at Private Chen, who was still guarding him. "What are you?" he asked quietly. Chen smiled without humor. "We're humans. We come from a world that spent 4 billion years teaching us how to survive, and we just taught you what happens when you threaten people we've promised to protect." The galaxy was about to learn a new lesson about the small blue planet called Earth, and the dangerous children it had sent to the stars. The rescued Zilani prisoners sat in the medical bay of the UES Vengeance, watching human medics work with quiet amazement. Dr. Amy Foster moved between the injured with the same intensity she might show in a major hospital, treating wounds and broken bones with equipment that seemed impossibly advanced for such a young species. Commander Thiss had a broken arm and several cuts on his face, but he was alive when everyone had expected him to die. He watched Dr. Foster work and tried to understand what he had just witnessed. "Doctor," he said quietly, "your people saved us, but the cost must have been terrible. How many of your ships were destroyed?" Dr. Foster looked up from the medical scanner she was using on a Zilani scientist. "None. We didn't lose a single ship." Thiss stared at her in disbelief. "That's impossible. The Vorthak had 15 warships. They've never been defeated in battle. They'd never fought humans before," Dr. Foster replied simply, then went back to treating her patients. News of the battle spread across the galaxy faster than anyone expected. Within hours, every major government and military force knew that the Vorthak Empire had suffered its first total defeat. More shocking was how it had happened. The humans had not used superior numbers or advanced technology. They had won through tactics and determination that most species found frightening. Admiral Morrison stood in his command center, reading reports from across human space. 3 more Vorthak fleets were mobilizing to avenge their defeat. The Vorthak Empire was calling for a holy war against the humans who had dared to humiliate their warriors. Captain Rodriguez joined him at the tactical display. Her ship, the UES Retribution, had taken some damage during the battle. But her crew was already making repairs. "Sir, we're getting reports that Vorthak forces are gathering in the Sigma sector," Rodriguez said. "Intelligence estimates at least 50 ships, including their newest battleships." Morrison nodded calmly. "Good, let them come. The more they send, the more we can destroy." Rodriguez looked at her admiral with respect and a little concern. "Sir, 50 ships is a lot more than 6. Even for us." Morrison smiled coldly. "Lisa, we're not going to fight them with 6 ships. We're going to fight them with every ship humanity can build. The Vorthak want a war? Let's give them one they'll never forget." Across the galaxy, the Galactic Federation Council was meeting in emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species argued about what the human victory meant for galactic politics. Some were excited that someone had finally stood up to Vorthak aggression. Others were worried about human military capabilities. High Counselor Vex of the Zilani spoke to the assembly with passion. "The humans saved 23 of our people when our own military couldn't help them. They risked their lives for strangers they had never met, asking for nothing in return." Senator Krill of the Turian Republic stood to respond. "But their methods were extremely violent. They used tactics that most civilized species would consider barbaric. Are these really the kind of allies we want?" Vex's response silenced the chamber. "Senator, my people were going to be tortured, enslaved, and sold like animals. The humans stopped that from happening. I don't care if their methods offend your civilized sensibilities." The debate continued for hours, but the result was inevitable. The Federation voted to support humanity's right to defend itself and its allies. They also quietly began requesting human military advisors for their own defense forces. On Earth, President Laura Thompson received Admiral Morrison's report in her office in Geneva. The human homeworld was peaceful and green, full of cities where people grew food and created art. But it was also the world that had taught humanity how to survive against impossible odds. "Admiral, what do you need to face these new Vorthak fleets?" President Thompson asked. Morrison's voice came clearly through the quantum communication link. "Give me every volunteer who wants to join the Defense Corps, and every ship our yards can build. The Vorthak Empire has been terrorizing innocent people for centuries. It's time someone put an end to that." Within weeks, volunteers from across human space were joining the new Deathworld Defense Corps. Former soldiers, police officers, and even civilians who had never fought before signed up to protect people they had never met from enemies they had never seen. The human shipyards, which had been building peaceful exploration vessels, retooled to produce warships. But these were not the massive battleships that other species built. They were smaller, faster, and designed with the same philosophy that had made humans successful on Earth. They were built to survive, to adapt, and to never give up. Captain Hayes, now promoted to Major, led the training program for the new Defense Corps Marines. Soldiers from across human space learned the tactics that had worked against the Vorthak. They learned to fight like persistence hunters, to use every advantage their evolution had given them. "Remember," Hayes told a group of new recruits, "we're not the biggest or strongest species in the galaxy, but we're the ones who learned to survive on a world that was constantly trying to kill us. That makes us the most dangerous." The first test of the expanded Defense Corps came 3 months later. A Vorthak fleet of 30 ships attacked a peaceful colony world in the Centauri system. The colonists sent out a desperate call for help, not expecting anyone to arrive in time. Captain Rodriguez, now commanding a squadron of 8 human ships, arrived within hours. The battle that followed became legendary throughout the galaxy. The human ships moved through the Vorthak fleet like sharks through a school of fish, using tactics that no military academy taught. When it was over, 28 Vorthak ships were destroyed or captured. The remaining 2 fled back to Vorthak space with news that shocked their empire. The humans were not just defending themselves anymore. They were actively hunting Vorthak fleets and destroying them wherever they found them. War Chieftain Grax, now a prisoner on a human penal colony, was interviewed by Galactic News Services. The once proud warrior looked broken and defeated as he spoke. "They fight like demons," he said quietly. "They show no mercy to those who threaten innocent people. The Vorthak Empire thought we were the apex predators of the galaxy. We were wrong. The humans are. As reports of human victories spread, something unexpected began to happen. Species that had been terrorized by the Vorthak for generations started to hope. Pirates and slavers who had operated freely began to worry about human retaliation. Admiral Morrison, now commanding a fleet of 50 ships, received a message that made him smile. It came from a group of former Vorthak slaves who had been freed during human raids. "Thank you," the message said simply. "Thank you for showing the galaxy that evil does not have to win." On the peaceful world of Zelani Prime, children played new games in their schools. They pretended to be the Human Defense Corps, rescuing people from pirates and defeating monsters. Their teachers watched with mixed emotions as the children learned that sometimes the best protectors of peace were those who understood the true cost of war. High Counselor Vex stood in his office, looking at a star map that showed human patrol routes across Federation space. Green lines marked areas where human ships protected peaceful colonies and trade routes. Red zones showed regions where pirates and slavers no longer dared to operate. A aide approached with the latest reports. "Sir, the Vorthak Empire has officially requested peace negotiations. They want to end the war." Vex nodded slowly. In less than a year, the humans had accomplished what the Federation had failed to do in centuries. They had brought peace to the galaxy, not through diplomacy or compromise, but through the simple promise that anyone who threatened innocent people would face the fury of Earth's children. The galaxy had learned that the small blue world on the edge of known space was indeed a death world, but it had also learned that sometimes it took children of a death world to protect those who could not protect themselves. In the depths of space, human ships continued their patrols, watching over peaceful worlds and keeping the darkness at bay. They carried a simple message that had spread throughout the galaxy. We don't leave people behind, ever. The age of Vorthak terror was over. The age of human protection had begun.